So, a very quick reflection. I've been looking back over my conversation with Rebecca Rossiter from Poole, from the many minutes that I didn't use in my first vlog, using that conversation. But there was so much of it that weeks later it really chimed with where I'm at now. Looking at how we can make our digital work, can transform it into something that allows us a real dialogue with our audiences and our participant groups. It's felt a little bit one way, and I think also that's having an impact on my motivation to keep making content. You keep doing your workshops and doing your sessions, and because you can feel the reaction to them, you can understand the impact very quickly, and you can feel like you have a minute by minute evidence base on rolling that out and pushing it to other people and saying you should come and do this, it would be great for your group. And that's just really missing. I don't understand why some things work and others don't, which is difficult. But there's also, Rebecca and I talk a lot about the kind of positives of the democratisation of responsibility. We're all working across so many more areas of our organisation's work, and we're finding that really positive. I am.
And have you had a bit of that, like, to and fro from who's using your resources?
That is something that I'm hoping will build up more. So there's been a little bit of engagement on our social media pages. So there was one piece about Museum of the Toddler, which was kind of inspired by the fact that my son just collects and picks up absolutely everything whenever we leave the house, and even in the house is just like ends up becoming his own personal sort of museum of different boxes full of coins and shells and all sorts of stuff. So I was quite interested in that idea, and I wrote a piece on it. And yeah, I got one or two comments of people saying, oh yeah, my little one does this, or you know, my son used to collect such and such. So that was quite nice. And then yeah, I think other than that, I haven't had a huge amount of kind of comments online, and I think sometimes maybe it's people feel a bit inhibited to say anything. I have tried always to give people the option of just like, you know, you can email me to share your stories and that sort of thing. I haven't had an awful lot come back, so I would love to see that happening more. I think that would for me be a real measure of, okay, this is kind of, you know, reaching.
You run something, you run an event, you can see in their faces whether they've enjoyed it, hey, for a start, but you might get people who, oh, thanks very much, you've had a lovely day, all that stuff, and that makes me sound very needy, but it is like it is important that you get that sense.
I think it's really important. We were involved with a big local festival just fairly shortly before lockdown began, called Light Up Poole, and myself and the programming team, we, you know, put so much work into that, and we had this family trail with lava lamps all sort of through the museum, and just on the first day it opened, seeing these like early years groups coming in with their clipboards and going round, and they were so excited and sitting in the lounge looking at these lovely lava lamps. I mean, you couldn't want for nicer feedback than that. It was really uplifting, and it was really positive, and a real kind of like, yeah, we did this well, you know, and
that's motivating, isn't it?
It's like, totally motivating, because there are times when you know you are so stressed out and working long hours to kind of meet that deadline. But when you get that immediate feedback, it's so sort of reassuring, and you suddenly think, oh yeah, that's what the effort was for, you know, it was worth it.
I wonder what to replace that, like what's the replacement for that? How do we know what we're doing is...
Yeah, I don't know. I think other than potentially, and it's a conversation I've just started to have with some colleagues, other than having a sort of sessional offer online where you are directly kind of, you know, communicating with people in real time, I'm not sure you can. So we are kind of thinking about that, whether we could have some bookable sessions.
We've just started the same. I think, you know, it's like the phases are, what can I do now? Quick, you know, like that represents what we were already doing out there. Okay, now what other things can I do that's there as a resource? And now it's like the next step is, but what about interaction?
And I think it's interesting that before all this, I think you know, we talked a lot about ideas for online engagement, but it almost ended up falling sort of to the bottom of everyone's to-do list, because you're there and, you know, doing the hands-on stuff that's often very time consuming and busy. So by having been forced to do it, we're sort of, I think all of us just come a long way in the last couple of months of seeing what we can actually do with fairly limited resources.
Moving on from that thought from Rebecca just there, we've all had that opportunity to realise that we can stop and reassess our priorities, and look at what, where we can make changes and take responsibility. We also thought about what we've had to take on or had to pay attention to that we didn't have to before, and how that has changed the way we're working now and maybe in the future, particularly around social media.
I think that's another thing. It's not just the website, but obviously promoting it through social media. And in my personal life, I tend to steer away from social media quite a lot. I think the last time I put something on Facebook was about 4 years ago, when my son was a baby. And
I've had comments already like, "Oh, you're back!" Like, because I started sharing things on Facebook, and people were like, "Oh, we didn't know where you were."
Exactly. I've been off the sort of off the grid for some time. So
small kids, you've not got time.
Yeah, exactly. I think your priorities change. I think you kind of you just haven't got the headspace after you. Sometimes it's just too much, isn't it, with kind of all the different updates and everything. So even personally, I've steered away from that. So now I'm a bit more kind of, just in a work context at the very least, checking it more, having a look each day at our sort of social media feeds, seeing who's made comments, and just keeping myself a bit more in the loop with things.
I think there's an appreciation as well. So like the Wiltshire Museum and the Salisbury Museum, like a number of people are on furlough, and suddenly you realise you knew how much work that the people who were doing that stuff were doing, but now you really know.
Yeah,
because now we've all got to do it.
So I'm about to share Rebecca's top learning points from her time working in lockdown. I asked her that at the end of the conversation, and have been doing so with other people I've been doing videos with. And speaking of learning, I've realised I don't know why I don't ask my colleagues and peers these sorts of questions on a more regular basis. It might feel odd. I've made myself a reason for doing it by doing this vlog, but it's something I'll consider, I don't know, weaving into conversation from here on in. But here are Rebecca's anyway.
So my first one was be generous and embrace the culture of sharing, which is probably a bit obvious because that's what we're all doing. But I was thinking about our schools offer, for example, and sometimes we get a bit worried where, it's normally we do bookable workshops, and it is, trying to generate some income to cover our costs and so on. So we can sometimes be a bit protective of like, this is what we do in the workshop. We don't want to kind of give that away. But I think within the current circumstances, people really appreciate having these authentic activities, if you like, to do. The next one we've talked about, which was start with what you know, and feel confident with it. So for me, it was writing. But yeah, and again, what we mentioned about sort of it's okay to bring in your personal interests, and that gives a kind of authenticity to it and a bit of truth. And it was quite a nice example from our collections assistant. He's really interested in the history of medicine. So he wrote a piece about our pharmacy exhibit at the museum, and it was quite detailed, and he didn't expect to get an awful lot of people wanting to read it. He said it was probably a bit dry. It was one of the most popular posts that we put up. And then the last one was just about, be flexible and adaptable, review as you go, don't be afraid to change things if it's not working. And I think lockdown is the perfect time to just be creative and take some risks